It is now time for what I think is going to be the highlight of the day. My very good friend, Mitzi Perdue, is joining us. Mitzi is a legend in the industry. She puts the family in family office as part of two different multi-generational family businesses, and Sharon Hotels and Perdue Chickens. She spent massive amount of time mentoring children who come from generational wealth, how to deal with that responsibly, still find their own purpose and niche in life. And she's very active in numerous nonprofits, including WinThisFight.org that she founded, which fights human trafficking, which is really seen of late is a much bigger problem worldwide than I ever imagined. So my hat goes off to you with that, Mitzi. But today she's going to talk about her recent book, How to Be Up in Down Times, which I think is incredibly relevant. And we've talked about the market component of that all day long. Now we're going to talk about the psychological component. And by the way, since we're not in person today, we don't have swag bags to give you all, but Mitzi has graciously offered to autograph a copy of her book for all attendees today. So as she is speaking, we're going to drop a link in the chat where attendees can actually sign up. Mitzi's going to autograph books. We're going to ship them to you just as a token of appreciation for joining us today. But with that, my friend Mitzi Perdue, take it away.
Hi, everybody. And I just want to make sure, would somebody give me a thumbs up that it's coming through as it should? Yes?
Mitzi, you look great. You sound great. Thumbs up.
Wonderful, because we are going to talk about how to be up and down times. And in our time together, I recommend that you fasten your seatbelts because, let me make sure that we have the right one. Yes. In our time together, we're going to go back 2,000 years to what one of the greatest philosophers ever had to say about being up. And we're going to go back 200 years, what an emperor had to say, 20 years, what a saint had to say, and also 20 years ago, what one of the wisest businessmen, I happen to have been married to him, Frank Perdue, what he had to say on happiness. But weaving in and out on all of this is a story of a little 12-year-old girl. And we've gone back 2,000 years, 220. Now we're going to go back a couple of days. You're going to meet a little girl named Allison. And there's a somewhat problem with this slide, which is there's only one part of it that's true. Allison is age 12. That's not her real name, although that is the name that she and I agreed that I would use. And it's not a real picture of her because the details I'm going to share of her life are ones that, well, she doesn't want her image attached to them. However, the image, I went through almost 100 stock photographs to find one that just reflected what she looked like. And today, she's an upbeat, happy little girl. She lives in Idaho. She wants to be a rancher when she grows up. She loves horses. She told me that she even loves the smell of horses. But 3 years ago, she wasn't where she is today. It's a somewhat dark story, and we'll learn about it shortly. But before we do, there's a question about Allison, which is 3 years ago, she and her caretaker were sitting on a couch in a home with 6 other little boys and girls, and they were watching Survivor, and they were all into it, but it was interrupted by the Humane Society. And the Humane Society was inviting people to adopt a really cute little puppy. And Kathy Jo, the caretaker, was thinking, oh, it would take a heart of stone not to want to take that puppy home. Allison broke into Kathy Jo's thoughts and said, I wish I were a puppy. This took Kathy Jo aback. Why would you want to be a puppy? And little Allison went on, I really, really want to be a puppy. Please, can I be a puppy? Well, why would she want to be a puppy? It's not because puppies are cute and cuddly or have a simple life. Nope, there's a darker reason. And we'll get to it in a moment. But before we do, let's switch focus. By the way, she's going to appear several times in our half hour together. Before we do, I want to switch the focus to you. And since the topic is how to be up and down times, let's see what one of the greatest philosophers ever, Plato, what advice he had for you. And we're going back right now to ancient Athens. You're looking here at the Parthenon. This hill here is the Acropolis. And right here is the Academy. That's the original word for academy today. This area here was called the Academy. It was open air, and Plato used to address his students. And one day, his student asked him, what does it make to be happy? What does it take to long-term have a great life? The kind where at the end of your life you can think, I led a good life. Well, here's what Plato had to say. And I hope it's slightly surprising to you. Plato said that there are three things that men, and presumably women, but I'm quoting him and he said men, there are three things that men think will make them happy: money, power, and fame. But Plato said they never do. They never do long term. Well, of course, the students surrounding him said, why not? I mean, money, fame, power, those are delicious. How can you say that they're not going to make you happy? Plato answered. He said the problem with money, power, and fame is that you always need a bigger dose. And Plato didn't say this, but translated into today's world, I think that he would say that it's like a street drug. You know, initially they're delicious, but you need a bigger and bigger dose. They never long-term make you happy. So, of course, his students asked him, what does make people happy? And Plato answered that there are three things that long-term do make people happy. And these are truth, beauty, and goodness. You know, my late father used to say, one good idea can change your life. I can't know what good ideas are going to be useful to you, but to me, that's one of the most useful thoughts ever, that money, power, and fame don't long-term lead to happiness, but truth, beauty, and goodness do. Well, let's move on to see how this actually plays out in the real world. I want to show you an example of somebody, and we're here at Emperor Napoleon, somebody who had all the money, power, and fame that the world ever had to offer. How about all the worldly goodies that the world has to offer? And I'm just going to quickly point out some of the things about this portrait. It's from 1805, and it's by the artist Ingress. And notice all the symbols of power that Napoleon has. In his hand, you see the scepter of Charlemagne. On his head, the golden laurels of imperial Rome emperors. You'll see, gold, diamonds, and even his posture. He's staring at you, but he's looking down at you. Even though he's seated, he's looking down at you. This is a man with all the worldly goodies that Earth had to offer. Let's contrast him with Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, what a different story she has. She had a vow of poverty. The clothes that she wears, there are three cotton saris, and the sandals on her feet. And these saris, they were woven by lepers. Those are the only possessions that she owns. In her, after she took her vow of poverty, the only personal possessions that this woman owned were three saris and the sandals on her feet. And what about her life? She dedicated her entire life to serving others. She dedicated her life to helping dying lepers or kids with AIDS. No, her entire life was dedicated to serving the poorest of the poor. Well, we've been talking about money, power, and fame, and truth, beauty, and goodness. Which one led to happiness? In the case of Napoleon, we don't have to guess, because he actually wrote in his diary, he wrote at the end of his life, he's in exile in St. Helena in the South Pacific, and Napoleon says, in my entire life, I cannot count 6 happy days. What about Mother Teresa with her vow of poverty and serving the poorest of the poor and only owning 3 saris and the sandals on her feet? Mother Teresa writes, my life has been a feast of unending joy. So that's how Plato's philosophy plays out. And I invite you to think about that in your own life, but we will move on. We will move on back to Allison. Remember, we were with Allison, we met her at age 12, and we talked about her at age 9. Let me tell you a little bit by why she wanted to be a puppy. I'm not going to tell you quite yet why she wanted to be a puppy, but I'll tell you a little bit of the background. At age 6, Allison was taken from her parents. Now, here's why she was taken from them. They were very, very, how about dysfunctional alcoholics, but on top of that, they were addicted to methamphetamines. Her father used to beat her. He'd occasionally even put out cigarettes on her arms. But the worst thing that he did to her was he told her, you're no good to anybody. You might as well be dead. And Allison, since that's a message she's hearing from her parent, became suicidal. Well, Child Protective Services took her from her parents and they put her in a mental hospital for suicidal teenagers. So just this little 6-year-old is in a hospital for suicidal teenagers. She was there for 3 months. And then, because she was unadoptable, she was put in a home for unadoptable children. There were 80 kids there. And it was a sad, difficult life because she couldn't do anything in an autonomous way. Everything that she did was directed. Even if she wanted to go from one room to another to cross the threshold, she had to use the phrase, which I bet she used 10,000 times in her life, may I proceed? Allison had a dark, difficult life, but then something changed. And we're going to get to what changed in Allison's life. She was in that home for 3 years, and then something of just transcendent beauty and wonderfulness happened to her. And we'll get to it in a moment. But let's bring the focus back to you and talk about something. We've been talking about truth, beauty, and goodness as a way of achieving happiness. I want to give you something that is more short-term, something that you can do right off, or maybe this weekend. But it's something that I don't know if I can guarantee, but I really believe that it has an awfully good chance of increasing your happiness, and not only your happiness, but the happiness of those who come after. And it comes from Frank Perdue. Now, there's something that you wouldn't know about Frank. You may know that he was famous as a marketer. He was famous for a chicken company that was a father and son operation. He brought it to employing 20,000 people at the time of his death in 2005. Well, in 2000, Frank was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Actually, I was going to say he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he was. But the real point of this story is he was also diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He lived another 5 years. But when you have those kind of diagnoses, you start thinking what's really important in life. And Frank felt that what was really important in life was his family and those who came after him. And he started thinking, what can I do for them besides material possessions? And he was fairly skeptical of material goodies because he was so aware of what we used to call rich man's disease, where people who come from very wealthy families absolutely muck them up. I mean, I bet you all can think of examples of suicides or drug addiction or quarrels that tear the family apart. I bet you all know of those. Frank certainly did, and I did. We spent 3 days of total immersion thinking, what values could he transmit to his children and those who came after him that would help keep them having a healthy, good life so that at the end of their days they could think, I led a good life. Well, I'm going to share with you what we came up with. And he came up with 10 things that he bequeathed to his children. He called it an ethical will, and every child and every grandchild and every new member of the family receives a bronze copy of this. And I'm not going to read it to you because you will get it in the free book that I'll be sending to you and autographing to you. But I'll read you a couple of them. Be honest always. Be a person whom others are justified in trusting. If you say you'll do something, do it. But the one that's most relevant to right now is the way to be happy is to think what you can do for others. And since leaving values, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do for those who come after you, I'm going to invite you to think for a moment about what values you'd like to transmit. But in the view of the shortness of time, although I'd like you to think about it, and I'd dearly like you to act on it, and if you write away for the book that I'm donating, which I dearly hope you will, you'll see directions of how to put it together in an ethical will and how to use it so that your family looks at it almost like we Americans look on the Constitution. But let's move on. And back to Allison. Allison is age 9 at this point, and a most wonderful woman, Kathy Jo McGee, really cares about foster children. And so she used to visit this group home, the 80 kids where little Allison was. And Allison's problem was that with every month in this institution, she was becoming less and less adoptable. And Kathy Jo was well aware what happens to children who are in foster care and who can't be adopted. Very often they're runaways. And if they're runaways, a typical runaway child is found by a trafficker within 24 hours. And that trafficker is going to come up to the little runaway child or the teenager or whoever and say, I bet you could use a hot meal. I bet you could use a nice warm place to stay. And that person now has control of the victim and is going to have them enter a life of trafficking. And the typical outcome for these children is within 7 years, they're going to be dead. And they're going to be dead because of suicide, overdose, murder for organ harvesting. I mean, Kathy Jo knew what was in store for Allison. And then when Allison was saying, I wish I were a puppy, it took Kathy Jo's breath away, because when she asked little Allison, why do you want to be a puppy? Allison told her, if I were a puppy, people might want to adopt me, but I'm just a kid and nobody cares. Well, in an act of just transcendent beauty, Kathy Jo decided to adopt Allison. And this was not a costless sacrifice on Kathy Jo's part, because Kathy Jo didn't even have a spare bedroom. Kathy Jo ended up, to this day, she's sleeping on a cot so that Allison has a bedroom. Well, how this transformed Allison's life is extraordinary, and we'll go back to in a minute. But at the moment, I want to switch focus again, but this time, ladies and gentlemen, it's on me. So I want to share with you what the knowledge that I've shared with you about serving others, about thinking what you can do for others, about money, power, and fame versus truth, beauty, and goodness. I'm going to share how it's impacted my life. And it begins with something that happened to me a year and a half ago. I heard a lecture on human trafficking. before the words were just, human trafficking, I had no idea what it meant. But the speaker, his name was Paul Hutchinson, was telling how a little girl like Allison may be forced to have sex with strangers 7 to 12 times a night, or even more, 365 days a year, whether she's having her period or not, until she dies from suicide or organ harvesting, or one way or another, she's not going to have a long life. Well, I'm sitting in the audience thinking, I've never heard of anything more horrible. I want to do something about it. But then I thought, which charity could I cut back? Because, if I'm going to write a great big check to Paul Hutchinson's charity, good Lord, that means cutting back on some other charity. And I don't want to cut back in the food bank. I love the food bank. I don't want to cut back in Red Cross. I don't want to cut back on any organization that I already support. What can I do? Who do I cut back on? And then I thought, I've inherited from my parents the most valuable thing I own, I think, a de Medici cardinal's desk. We think it comes from the year 1600. And I thought, if I put this up for auction, something great could happen. Two good things could happen. First, I could raise a lot of money to help rescue children who are being trafficked. But it could also, because the provenance of it, my father was the co-founder of the Sheraton hotel chain. He was president of it. And if I put that up for auction, it would probably get a lot of attention and raise awareness, which is also important. Between awareness and raising funds, I thought I could do something. And then I thought, you know what? I bet there are other people in my situation, ones who might also be willing. Maybe it's hard for them to put together cash to support an anti-trafficking organization of their choice, but they probably could donate some item that maybe it's in storage, maybe they're tired of it, maybe they want to make room for something else. So I began asking people, and here are some of the donations that have come in. Here's a diamond and sapphire necklace that belonged to Marlene Dietrich, appraised at $1 million. Here are 12 imperial dinner plates. They belonged to Tsar Alexander II. They were a birthday present from his father, the Tsar who preceded him. And as far as we know, there are 14 of these in the world. 2 of them are in a museum in Russia, and 12 belong to 2 brothers who hate trafficking, and they know where they want. When they convert their tangible property into cash, they know just where they want it to go. Other donations that have come in, well, let me point to my prize. This is a 69.7 carat ruby, and there's a quick little story about it. I've been traveling ever since starting an organization called Win This Fight, which collects items that will be part of a giant auction, probably in the year 2022. It was delayed because of COVID-19. Anyway, I've traveled all over the world, and I visited Taipei, and I visited a guy, he's elderly, and he told me that he hates trafficking, but he said, something on the scale that you're trying for, something that could raise $100 million, that's going to bring you to the attention of the cartels, because the 3 biggest sources of income for illegal activity for criminals is illegal drugs, illegal arms, and human trafficking. This elderly guy told me, if you continue on the path that you're going to, the cartels are going to hear about it. You might be in personal danger. They might try to kill you. Well, we're having tea in his home, and I blurted out the answer. I didn't think about it. It just came out, but it was from the heart. I told this elderly gentleman, I'm 78 years old. I believe in this cause, and I don't care if they try to kill me. Well, at that moment, this elderly gentleman stood up, walked behind the chair where he was sitting to a wall, pulled a curtain. There was a safe, and I watch him, manipulating the dials. He reaches in, and out comes a ruby that almost is the size of a golf ball. And he said, I want you to have this because I hate trafficking and I want this to raise awareness and I want it to raise money. Well, that's the story of the 69-carat ruby. A final one is an emerald from the treasure ship Atocha. Let's go back to Allison. And Allison will, I hope, I believe, will never be the victim of human trafficking because human traffickers go after the vulnerable, and any organization that does anything to make people less vulnerable, whether they know it or not, they're fighting trafficking. But if you happen to be involved in any organization that helps make people less vulnerable, or if you care about prevention, rescue, or rehabilitation, and particularly if you've got items that you'd like to convert into cash in a very seamless way through the Global Anti-Trafficking Auction, it will get so much publicity that is an example of the publicity that we've already had. PBS, the Public Broadcasting Corporation Service, they've already, it's in the can. They've done a half-hour documentary on Win This Fight and the items that have come in so far. People from all over the world are going to be bidding on these items. But back to Allison. Allison's mother now, her adopted mother, tells me that her life is just full of joy because she may be giving up a bedroom, but she said the joy of watching little Allison and the others that she cares for means that her life, I guess, she's probably not going to be like being compared to Mother Teresa, but Kathy Jo says her life is just unending joy as she thinks what she saved Allison from and the joy she gets in watching her develop to be all that she can be. Well, swinging back to you, my dearest hope for you is that some of the ideas that I've shared with you can help you be up and down times, but even going beyond that, I mean, I think even one of these ideas, my hope is that it might be useful to you so that at the end of your days, you can think, as Frank did, I've led a good life. And to repeat what they are, there's focusing on truth, beauty, and goodness with Plato, serving others, Mother Teresa, write an ethical will. And I made an absolute solemn promise to my wonderful friend James Catullus that I would end promptly on time. I wonder if there's time for one question, and if they're not, I guess that's going to be hard to do. So instead, I will just say that it's been a joy to be with you. I wish it were in person. I'd love it if next time we could be together. But meanwhile, may the ideas that I've shared with you be useful for you. Thank you.